Hello everyone, my name is Jim Miller, CEO of Core Data Analytics. We are the creators of EasyOps, an open source operations management, cloud-hosted application designed to help public utilities of any size implement efficient and effective maintenance management while building an asset management culture within that organization. So we have designed software to facilitate infrastructure asset management. In this video, I will address asset management and specifically by defining its framework and actions needed to implement it over time. It takes time to implement this. It isn't something that happens right away. It's a culture. You have to develop it. In subsequent videos, I will in detail demonstrate how EasyOps supports this transformation of an organization into an asset management culture. That's the goal. Let's start by defining the problem first. This will put into context why asset management is important and help you understand why the framework was developed in its current form. America is broke. This is fact, not speculation. As a nation, we have reached an inflection point of rising debt, increased debt service, rising prices and wages, and declining revenue in many communities. Subsequently, the past processes and methods relative to the sustainability of current infrastructure comes into question. This question of sustainability is supported by the American Society of Civil Engineers 2017 report card, which gives America's infrastructure a grade of D+. In addition, since 2008, infrastructure funding has fallen off the cliff to only a fraction needed for sustainable repairs and replacement. These two factors alone bear witness to a growing problem and clearly define the challenges ahead. Understanding the problem is the first step to finding credible solutions based on facts and data, so that sound policies can be created to gracefully create solutions. Within this context, asset management was developed as a framework of policies and actions to help communities prepare for a new future. Asset management, as defined, is a forcing function that addresses the current environment of run to fail. Run to fail simply means that infrastructure is installed, used without proper maintenance and care, and when it fails, we start over with a new system with emergency financing at high cost and little planning to minimize risk and service disruption, leading to the highest cost possible for an asset's life cycle. That's the problem. America can no longer afford to operate within this context without catastrophic consequences to the health and welfare of the American people. Asset management is the framework needed to address run to fail. It's needed to turn the current run to fail process into a plan for success. So let's define asset management. What is asset management? Infrastructure asset management is the integrated, multidisciplinary set of strategies in sustaining public infrastructure assets such as water treatment facilities, sewer lines, roads, utility grids, bridges, and railways. That's not all of it. There are airports, many other things in the public sphere and in the private sphere that fall into these categories. Asset management is a process all municipalities, special use utilities, and private businesses can use to make sure that planned maintenance can be conducted and capital assets such as pumps, motors, pipes, all of the bits and pieces can be repaired, replaced, and upgraded on time, and that there's enough money to pay for it. Asset management is the practice of managing the infrastructure capital assets to minimize the total cost of owning and operating these assets while delivering the desired service levels. That is so important. What do the people want and what do they expect? This is called inclusivity, and it is part of a concept called self-governance that is part of America's Western tradition. It is so important. A high-performing asset management program includes detailed asset inventories, operation and maintenance tasks, and long-range financial planning. So, asset inventories, operation and maintenance, and long-range financial planning. Those are the three pieces. That is really the essence of asset management. Let's talk about responsibility. And this is a shared responsibility, not just the elected officials, the mayor, the council. It is everyone's responsibility. It's the responsibility of the citizens themselves, the ratepayers. It's their responsibility to inform the people that they elect, to let them know the level of service that they expect. It's a responsibility of the elected to build plans that are appropriate for their staff, the people that they pay wages to perform the maintenance, to take care of the assets. Specifically for a public works director or a manager, he has to have a working plan to work with. And he needs tools to implement that plan with. So he does that inside the context of an asset management program. He is going to be empowered to deliver the levels of service at a minimum cost on behalf of the elected who hired him for the ratepayers who expect those things to be done responsibly. So asset management programs with good data, including asset attributes, the age, condition, criticality, priorities, life cycle costing, proactive operations and maintenance, and capital replacement plans based on cost-benefit analysis can be the most efficient method of meeting this challenge. In other words, a great plan and a great culture, an inclusive culture. Promoting inclusive participation within a community is the embodiment of American self-governance, which provides the best outcome overall relative to the expectations of levels of service and the acceptance financially of limitations currently not affordable. So when there's a dialogue overall with everyone, the elected, the staff, the workers, and the people that they serve, when there is a two-way street, then you can have a great dialogue and people can accept any limitations, especially if those limitations affect their rates, so that they understand that they are paying for exactly what they get and they are not buying something that they can't afford. It is this dialogue that level sets that sets it into equilibrium. So it must exist as part of the culture. And you do this by collecting data and turning it into information about the assets. You share that transparently with the community. And when you have big changes or emergencies, and you need to inform them. You have different ways of doing that: letters, newsletters, emails, a web page, or you hold town halls and you show them any new technology or broken pipes or pieces, and you inform them what's going on. So there's this dialogue, and that builds trust with openness. It is important that you have facts and data. Facts and data set you free. That's Alan Mulally, Boeing executive and Ford CEO. For public works directors, it's important to understand that cost accounting is history. It's what has already happened. It's not enough to run your organization behind the curve. It's absolutely essential that with proper operations management, that your schedules are out 3, 6, even a year ahead of time, and so that you know what your budgets are. That's completely possible with the right operations management software. The benefits of asset management. Asset management provides utility managers and decision makers with critical information on capital assets and timing of investments. Once again, facts and data set you free. You need to know what you have, how old it is, what conditions it's in, what are the priority assets, what are the critical assets, and the schedule for replacement, and the schedule and the proper operations and maintenance work that needs to be done to sustain them through their life cycle. Facts and data. So here's a question. If you are an elected official watching this video, or a public works director, let me ask you this simply. How many valves, fire hydrants, vaults, catch basins, meters, feet of storm, sewer water, pipe do you have? Manholes, pumps, buildings, lift stations, parks, fields, emergency generators, the pieces to your SCADA delivery or telemetry system if you have it, traffic signs, electric signals, sensors, and all of the different types, locations, and conditions, individually and in groups and in total, and their depreciated life cycle. Where are they in their life cycle? Can you answer that? You should be able to. And in the new paradigm of asset management, you will be able to do that. So here are the benefits of asset management. You prolong the life cycle of any asset by taking care of it. By taking care of it properly and having the budget to do that, you meet consumer demands. You meet the level of service and the expectations of the people who are paying for it, and for paying for your jobs, and the ones who elected you. It makes sense that they be happy with the work that you perform. It helps you set the rates commensurate for doing that. It gives you the budget forecasting on the critical pieces and the timing of their replacement so you don't have emergency failures. And if you do, you have plans for those failures. So you meet the service level expectations and, very important, the regulatory requirements, which seem to always be changing. You improve your response time to emergencies. You're more secure. You have safety plans in place and protections. And you end up reducing the overall costs of both operations and the capital expenditures. Those are just some of the benefits. There are more, but these are the major ones. If you're going to implement an asset management program, there are really 5 core questions that you have to ask of your organization. And I'm talking about an inclusive organization, a self-governance organization as a goal. You have to know the current state of your assets, the level of service expectations. You have to know your critical assets. You have to know the minimum life cycle cost, that is, what your budget, the minimum budget that you need to maintain those assets at a minimum. And then you have to have in place among your rates, knowing what your total liabilities are, you need to plan for long-term funding and replacement of those. Those are the 5 core questions. If you're going to implement these, that's 5 steps to putting them in place. The first step, number 1, is what is the current state of my system's assets? And to do this, you have to know what they are. So you have to quantify them. You have to put them in a catalog, generally a database, and you give them attributes to define them, including their lat and long, their altitude, other data, their size, the model, the make, what department they're in, what sub-department, so that you can group these assets appropriately for more analysis. And you have to understand that you're not going to get this done all at once. It takes time, years, to begin to get this culture and get this information together. So over time, as assets are rehabilitated, repaired, or replaced, your inventory will become more accurate. Because when you begin this, you may not have all the information. You may be at the end of the life cycle of an 80-year asset and you simply don't have those records from 80 years ago. Because after all, you are just starting this asset management culture, which is data and information driven. So in step 1, you ask of yourself and of your organization and of your culture and the people, what do I own? Where is it? What is its condition? What is its useful value? What is its depreciated value? And to plug our software, Core Data, EasyOps provides you the ability to do this. The best practice is preparing an asset inventory and a system map. Many people use a GIS system. EasyOps does this with Google Maps as part of the application. No additional cost. Developing a condition asset assessment and a rating system. American Society of Civil Engineers provides a grading system that is part of EasyOps. Assessing remaining useful life by consulting projected useful life tables or decay curves. You can actually determine the life cycle, say, of old cast iron pipe. There are tables that give you those values, and so you can project and make very good educated guess on when those need to be replaced. And those can save a lot of money or prepare you for failure way ahead of time so that you have the funds. And as part of that best practice, you have to determine the asset values and the replacement costs. So those are the questions in step 1 that you need to ask. In step 2, you have to ask, what is my required sustainable level of service? And this, once again, comes into self-governance. You have to know what the expectation of the people are. So knowing your required sustainable level of service will help you implement an asset management program and communicate to stakeholders what you're doing. So it's a two-way street. It's an open, transparent dialogue that makes it successful. You need that if you are an elected and if you're a public works director, to have the people have confidence in you and you have confidence in them that they will support you. Quality, quantity, reliability, and environmental standards are elements that can define level of service and associated system performance goals, both short-term and long-term. You may have an increasing population. What if you have a declining population? What if you have a great new complex that comes in that's going to impact your sewer treatment plant and all of the piping and everything and the lift stations in between? Those are part of all of the planning and the projected impacts to your rate structure. You need to make sure that you collect those fees and those impacts so that those new systems coming in pay their fair share. Now you can use information from your customers, data from your maintenance management system, and information from stakeholders to develop the level of service. Now that would seem kind of odd, but you have to be able to tell people if they demand service greater than what the system is able to perform, you have to tell them that that is an unacceptable level of expectation unless you want the rates raised, and for us to implement that, here's what I can deliver. And you tell that in an honest form, in an honest way, and you'll get support from them. And you've also planted the seed for upgrades in the future that you will be supported for, possibly. So your level of service requirements can be updated to account for changes due to growth, regulatory requirements, and technology improvements, and you'll have the support if you have this ongoing dialogue with the stakeholders. So in step 2, you should ask, what level of service do my stakeholders and customers demand? What do the regulators require, like the EPA and the state? What is the actual performance compared to what my perception is and what people's think about the performance? Let's say that they think that the performance is really bad, but like we talked about before, we can't deliver beyond a certain point because we have to upgrade things. Or we have lots of leaks or brownouts if it's a PUD, or we have lots of sewer backups because of root intrusion or other issues. And the staff may think that everything's okay, we're not keeping track of anything, but the customers are actually really upset about it. So if you have a maintenance management system, you're collecting this historical data, and you can show it on a map, you can actually visually identify your problems and support any upgrades or rate changes that you need. Or you can say, well, we have a problem here and these people are upset, and it's very reasonable that they're upset because here's the problem. Let's go fix it. And then you have to understand what are the physical capabilities of my assets, as we mentioned before. So the best practices include you analyze current and anticipated customer demand and satisfaction. You have to know that. As a public work director, you really need to understand that. Understanding current and anticipated regulatory requirements, you are bound by law, if you're a public works director, to obey that law, and you have liabilities, some even personal in some places, to obey those. So you need to understand them. But on the other hand, you need to communicate that out to the community so that they will understand what you're doing and why you're doing certain things. Everything is open and transparent. You need to write and communicate to the public, as I've said before, what you can do. So those are the questions for number 2 if you're going to implement asset management. The service levels, the expectations of the community. Step 3, which assets are critical to sustain performance? I've worked for 4 agencies, and we did not have in any of those a real critical list and a failure modes analysis of systems that were tied together, that were dependent upon one another. It's rare that that happens. That happens on airplanes at Boeing, but not out in the utilities. However, we need to begin to understand failure modes analysis and the criticality of the chain reactions of failures. It's only then that we can really understand the risk that's available and then act accordingly. Because assets fail, how you manage the consequence of failure is vital. Are you prepared for those? Have you rehearsed those scenarios with your staff if you're the public works director? Do you have the emergency backup equipment? Do you have pipes on trailers if you've had systemic sewer failures? Do you have everything in one place as a ready to go in case you need to do bypass pumping because you've had problems? Those would be really good plans to have in place. Also, understanding that not every asset presents the same failure risk or is equally critical to your system's operations. You may have downstream pumps that, although are important, they are not the actual critical pumps that, if they fail, everything else fails. If you provide electricity, electrical PUD, do you have transformers that are at the end of their life on the transmission lines? Do you have 7, 10, 12 kV transformers that are 50, 60 years old? Now these don't fail often. They're very stable, but they take a long time, up to a year, to replace. Do you have one in storage? Do you know where you can get one? Do you have a workaround plan? Can you use 2 smaller ones if it's even physically possible? So you have to know the criticality of your system. What's a minimum necessary to deliver at least water and sewage service to the community? So critical assets are those you decide that have a high risk of failing. And part of the grading from the ASCE is to know those and group those together, and you tackle those first. If they do fail, you need to understand what the major expense is, the impact to the community, and any safety concerns, and any failure modes downstream that will happen because of this juncture, this failure in this system. So you can decide how critical each asset is and rank them accordingly. And these are called vulnerability assessments. I had experience with this in emergency generators in Y2K, and the software that combined them, that put them together. It all had to be upgraded. And because it was upgraded in the year 2000 at midnight, nothing failed. But it would have if we had not done a vulnerability assessment and actually fixed the problem. So for this, you should ask, how can assets fail? What are the likelihoods, probabilities, and consequences of asset failure? What does it cost to repair them? And what are the social costs to the community? Best practices: listing assets according to how critical they are to system operations, conducting a failure modes analysis, root cause analysis, putting those in a system that captures that data for historical reference, and knowing the probability of failure ahead of time so that you can make plans. Analyzing failure risk and consequences is really important, and from an engineering perspective, you can go to tables, you can get help from your engineering consultants to help you do all of that. So in step 4, what are my minimum life cycle costs? What are the costs? And how can I minimize the total cost, including operations of maintenance, from time that I take over that installation of that particular project or that asset until its end of life? And that could be 75 years, and I may just be taking care of it for the time that I'm a public works director or a person responsible for that, or elected officials who are responsible for the totality of that performance for a period of time. But nevertheless, it is important to understand that in any capital budget in a city or any utility, 85% of a utility's expenses come from operation and maintenance. So you have the installation cost, that initial cost, and then you have the O&M, and in between that and the termination or the end of life of that asset, you're going to have all of these costs. Most of it is maintenance. You may have some rehab that extends the life, and then you'll have more operation maintenance cost. So typically 85% of any municipality and special use district that takes care of a set of assets in the public trust 85% of those costs, that budget, is going to be O&M. So it makes sense that within an asset management plan that you have an efficient operation and maintenance system and processes and methodologies set in place. So you want to optimize the work the O&M crews are doing, where they're doing it, and why they're doing it. And an asset management program helps make risk-based decisions by choosing the right project at the right time for the right reason for replacement. Most O&M needs to be routine and systematic, but that will depend on the age of your system. If you have an old system, you are going to be doing most of your time in reactive mode rather than proactive mode. And so asset management is a framework along with a maintenance management program, an O&M program, that will get you out of that reactive mode. I will note though, you do have to have funds to do that. And that's part of the inclusivity and totality of asset management. So in step 4, you should ask, what alternative strategies exist for managing O&M, personnel, and capital budget accounts? There may be new things coming down. There is often better, cheaper, easier to use software that will help you, that will give you information. It takes a little training and a learning curve, but once you're up and running, you generally get great gains in efficiency from adopting that as part of your asset management plan. What strategies are most feasible for my organization? They're going to be different for everyone. There are many commonalities, such as having an asset management and a maintenance management program, but everyone's a little bit different, and everyone has a different set and a different age and a different condition of assets. So they have to adapt and make the decisions based on what they have. You have to know what the costs of rehabilitation, repair, and replacement are for those critical assets. So moving from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance is one of the goals. And this can't be done overnight if you are in a very old system that is in trouble. And I have worked for 3 of those in 25 years. But I have seen the results of very proactive processes and methods and funding to replace the very worst parts of those. So every time you do that, you gain more time. You have this new asset, and that gives the staff more time, and that money can be spent doing the maintenance, which most likely was ignored in the past, to moving into a proactive and predictive maintenance program. So you can inch bug this by adopting this process, so that finally, over time, you're in a proactive O&M and replacement program. And by the way, that is the least total cost method to be in. You do not want to be in the emergency reactive mode. That is the most expensive mode. It also has the lowest level of service, and so your customers are upset most of the time. In step 5, what is my best long-term funding strategy? This is so important. So implementation of an asset management program, you need sound financial decisions. You need to develop an effective long-term funding strategy. One of the best things to do is create a sinking fund if you're in a position to do that. Not everyone is, and it takes time. It may take 10 years to get there. But one of the best things to do is to create a sinking fund and let the time value of money work for you. And you do this by avoiding that debt service and putting that money against O&M, which can be used to extend the life of other assets. You also have to be aware of your revenues. Is the population in my jurisdiction declining or is it increasing? Is there a greater expectation of levels of service that I need to meet? Are they telling me to do more? So determine your system's financial forecast, the revenues generated, and knowing because you've adopted a methodology to build a plan and to capture your cost and your O&M cost, you now are in a position to know the full economic costs of maintaining your set of liabilities for their life cycle. So in step 5, you should ask, do we have enough funding to maintain our assets for a required level of service? And is our rate structure sustainable for our system's long-term needs? Two very critical questions. And there are strategies that you will develop and will need to develop, and everyone's a little bit different. But I keep coming back to the fact that facts and data set you free. You must have the information to work with. Many organizations, especially in rural and small areas, rely on engineering firms to do that type of assessments for you. Now, I love engineering firms and I like engineers. But engineers bill at a very high rate, many multiple times of a staff person within an organization. You can, if you have a computerized maintenance management system that catalogs and captures that information about your assets, you can save a huge amount of money, and you have that information. It takes just a little training and the right programs to do it. Now, having that financial strategy is inclusive with your stakeholders, and it's transparent. And so when you want to make change, it is very wise to have town halls, invite the public in, your ratepayers, the ones that pay your bills and elect you, to tell them what you're doing in response to their demands. Properly done, you will almost always get your support. And you also get the best information and best ideas. You may get things that you didn't think of. Now, funding a dedicated reserve from current revenues will save you a lot of money, as alluded to before. You get the time value of money, and you can offset. Maybe you're at a time of replacement when the interest rates are high, so you can really save more money when that happens. But overall, you need to be in a position to finance asset rehabilitation, repair, and replacement through borrowing or other financial assistance. Now, my experience in 25 years in going out and funding large projects, I've discovered that one of the biggest cost drivers for contractors is risk. So if you can do anything to give them more information about the asset that they're going to bid on, that will generally drive the price way down. They perceive risk and they put a premium on lack of information. So if it's a sewer system, you can get a camera company to come in and provide videos and information all about your sewer system and give it to your contractors, the ones willing to bid on it, so that they can scope their bids on more knowledge. You will save lots of money, multiple times of what you would spend on doing the camera survey. You will get back in spades when you bid this out. So that's just some of the experience that I've had. So that's asset management, and here are the references. You can go to the EPA site, you can go to the ASCE report card, and depending on what state you're in, I'm in Washington State, so there's Washington State, and you can look and read more about this in depth. You can go to our site at easyops.co and see our computerized maintenance management system. So thank you for the opportunity of presenting this. This is the dashboard, and this is some of the information that I was talking about, and our software program gives you much of this information simply by you adding the information and working it, putting in your catalog, your locations of your assets, and then writing work orders and capturing the costs against them. We provide you instant feedback every time you add that information. So that is part of what we have done as Core Data Analytics, is to provide you a tool for the implementation of asset management. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.